What the fuck? Hi folks, my name is Adam and I like to make tiny nerdy things, and if you're anything like me, then you've recently realized your life has been missing a Kirby car, or a KARBY, if you will. Well, today I'm gonna fix that. Of course, the first ingredient in our eventual Kirby car contraption is gonna be the car, and to save clay on that, I'm gonna be making the frame within a frame out of aluminium and packing paper, and then I'll cover that in a messy second layer of clay. This doesn't need to look pretty, since all I really want to do at this point is give the aluminium frame a hard shell that I can build on top of. And once I'm happy with the overall proportions, I can pop it in the oven to cure and then cover it with another layer of clay. This will be my topmost layer of the car and the actual portion that you see in the finished product, so I want to take my time and make sure that it is smooth and curvaceous. However, once it's as smooth as I can be bothered to get it, I'll bake it again and then pull all the stuffing out the bottom. You don't necessarily need to remove the stuffing, but I'm cheap and I want to reuse it, so I'm gonna take it out and make other stuff with it later. And then finally, we're on to the final smoothing with sandpaper. And what feels like an eternity later, I'm ready to move on. I'll mark out the wheel wells using an appropriately sized circle cutter and then drill out the majority of the clay with a Forstner bit. I will inevitably crack and chip the clay, so I like to keep the pieces on the side so that I can glue it back in place. It's not a mistake if you know it'll happen. I can then clean up the edges and remove the leftover clay with my scalpel before marking out where the doors will be so that I can use a tool to scrape the edges into the clay. And it's time to add some of the detail. I'll start by building out the wheel wells with some flat worms of clay topped with smaller wormy dealies, and get them blended into one another and into the car body so there's a nice, smooth-ish transition. Then I can add the front bumper, the grille, and the little metal details before sticking the lights in place. To make the dual exhaust on the back, I'll wrap a thin layer of clay around some circle cutters and then toss these in the oven. Then I can cut them to size and glue them into a couple of holes that I drilled into the car's butt. I'll roll out 4 equally sized balls of clay and then squish and squeeze and prod and poke until I've got myself a set of 4 beautiful jalopy wheels. These can then get attached to the car, and to give my KARBY a bit of that cool guy look, I'm gonna angle the front wheels in a way that lets you know that this KARBY lives by its own set of rules. Finally, I'll attach the rear bumper that I totally remembered and left to the end because of important reasons, not because I forgot. Then one final bake, and it's time to attach the KARBY. I'll start by sticking a long, thin, flat piece of clay around the length of the car where Kirby's mouth will stop. This will help me in the next step when I'm lining up the topmost KARBY layer. This will consist of a large, flat piece of clay layered onto the car and then cut to length around the aforementioned KARBY lips. Then it's just a case of squishing and smoothing until I've got my KARBY layer in place. Then I can attach his hands/mirrors, blend those into the body, then add 2 adorable yet horrifying feet onto the back. Then the final step will be sticking his 2 big oval eyes onto the front, and we're onto the painting. Once I prime the whole thing white, I'll start by painting the body of the car blue. Now the original blue was a bit too dark, so I'll do a second coat with a lighter blue and then aggressively dry brush the entire surface with a much lighter blue to give a bit of wear and tear to the paint job. Then to really give some wear and tear, I'll stipple a hell of a lot of rusty brown around the bottom, the wheel wells, the door frames, well, just kind of everywhere. I love that Nintendo didn't just have Kirby eat a car, they made it infinitely worse by having him eat the tetanus mobile. And then to help blend the rust into the body a bit better, I'll lightly dab the rusty spots with some of that original blue. Then the wheels and the exhaust pipes will get painted with a thick coat of black, and once the majority of the painting is finished, I'll come back through and dry brush the edges with a dark gray. The bumpers and the grille will get a once over with my chrome markers, and then as it's beginning to dry, I'll go over it again, letting the paint bubble and build up. This will help give the bumpers a corroded, gnarly look rather than a perfectly flat, mirrored surface. And the hubcaps get the same treatment, and I can add a bit of surface rust to any of the shiny parts. And it's finally time to turn this car cover into a horrifying pink monster. It does make me wonder though, how long before we start seeing Kirby car covers for sale? I'm going to assume they're already for sale, and they probably sold out because you guys are sick. Otherwise, all that's left to do is paint his little feet season ice Kirby shoe red, and then we can get to painting his eyes. I'll start with a layer of black paint, followed by some dark blue half moons on the bottom. These then get light blue highlights and a couple of bright white dots up top. Then of course I need to add the adorable red blushing cheeks. Finally, once that's finished, it's a good time to put it down, step back, and wonder what you're doing with your life. Of course, nothing cures existential crisis quite like making a base. I figured if Kirby is a KARBY, then we might as well make a road. I'll start by gluing a strip of extra coarse sandpaper to my base, then trimming the edges to fit the top. To make my sidewalks on either side, I'll glue some thin sheets of XPS foam in place, then trim them down as well. Then I'll mark out the curbs and add some random paving stones before rolling out a little ball of aluminium over the surface to give it a little bit of texture. To protect the foam and get it ready for painting, I'll mix up some matte Mod Podge with some black paint and then give the entire base a nice thick coat. And since I'm so bad at measuring, I'll use the leftover mix to paint the edge of the base. In the sidewalks, we'll get a coat of dark gray, followed by several passes of progressively lighter gray dry brushes. Finally, to add a bit of color and life, I'll stipple some varying shades of green onto the road and the sidewalk to give the impression of a moss or lichen. I also decided to add a few tufts of grass strategically placed around the base, and then I'll add a little bit of dirt and rock where the road meets the curb. Otherwise, I'll pop Kirby in place, and we're on to the Glamour Shots. Now, while Kirby spins the background, I'd like to take a minute and thank my patrons that make this channel possible. And I'd also like to give a special shout out to my newest patrons, Alistair Hamilton, Lab, Imani, James Young, William Perry, Giancarlo Alvarado, Soylent Brad, Sarah McLeod, Tobaria, Kshira.ttv, Rebecca M, and Christopher Chamberlain. You are the rusty blue car upon which this pink fleshy mound of a channel attaches itself. If you'd like to help the channel out, then consider doing all the things that everyone begs you to do at the end of a video. Statistically, less than 15% of you have even reached this point, so if you're listening to this, then you're probably already subscribed or you've fallen asleep. If that's the case, then thank you and sweet dreams. Otherwise, we'll see you next time. Cheers.